Y'all, welcome back to Kentucky Fried Wargaming. We're two guys who aren't qualified to talk about anything, decided to talk about a game with hard math and chance. I'm Joe.
And I'm John.
And in this episode, we're going to do a spicy, algorithmically inclined reaction to the 40K balanced Dataslate, because it's the new hotness. It has just dropped a couple of days ago at the time that we're recording this.
Yeah.
And boy howdy, there has been some consternation and some weird reactions online. And I think it might be time for us to just sort of dip our toe into the pond, maybe bring like a little bit of calmer, grounded reason to the discussion, hopefully. And kind of talk about how we feel about it. Because let's be honest, when we were talking about sort of like last year in Wargaming and to this year, one of the things we talked about was 40K and how we really enjoyed the launch attempt and how we have feel like stuff is kind of stagnant. And I feel like it would be a great time to kind of circle back around to see if maybe this is a nice opening salvo to bring us back in.
Yeah, and I mean, I had some experience. Last weekend I played against the Drukhari.
The new Drukhari.
New detachment with Gene Stealer Cult. And yeah, well, I mean, we'll get into it, I'm sure, during the episode, but I have some experience with the changes, like specifically.
Yeah. But first, we got to talk about hobby time and games played. So, John, what you been up to?
Finished the End of the Death, Part 3. I finished the end of the Siege of Terra, which is the end of the Horus Heresy. That was a thing. I'm going to count that as hobby progress.
I don't know if we could count that as hobby progress, John.
Well, then I'm going to talk about how I magnetized all of my Wadroon and then magnetized all of my Slaves of Darkness. That counts. And I've also been working on Slingers, working on more Blooded, working on more Braves, and then I've chosen a Conquest to work on.
You have so many dudes to add to your 2K.
I have so
God,
many
that's so
dudes.
many guys.
And then I also have to start on my 100 Kingdoms, because Conquest has me by the,
short and curly.
Dangly bits. Yeah, like I've just been like whole hogging into like Conquest. Just going all the way to town with it. Want to play more of it. The new update comes out in a couple of days. I think 2 days.
Yeah, 2 days from when we're recording this. Yeah.
Yeah, and we'll probably be talking about it here as well.
I have so many things I'm looking forward to seeing how they're touching.
Yeah, like truly, I think Conquest has become the game I'm playing the most of. I've played 30-ish games in like 4 months.
Not 30. Like we're approaching 20.
20. Okay.
20.
Close.
We're close to 20.
Like, it's getting to the point where I can't count them anymore.
Yeah, we're coming up on 20.
Happening.
I think we're at like 16 to 18.
Yeah, is it 4 months? No, 3 months. Sorry, because we started in November.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so like 20 games in 3 months is pretty good. And like, I'm only going to keep playing more of them.
Yeah, truly. It's
Sorcerer Kings are coming out. It's going to be great.
It's just, God, you really set yourself up for pain at the end of this league. So many bodies.
The list itself already has so many bodies. Wadroon, if you're not running Wadroon as like the Tauntor Big Thunder Riders, it just seems like there's a lot more body.
It does feel kind of hoardy, which I don't think I expected coming into this, if I'm being honest. Like when I closed my eyes and pictured Wadroon, Horde is not what I thought. Luckily, you really, really like Horde armies, but
yeah, it's unfortunate. Like I do, it's a problem. Play Gene Stealer Cult, Astra Militarum, Skaven, like.
God, you really just pain. So much pain.
I hate myself.
You also like Berserk.
Clearly.
Like what?
It's true.
Go to therapy. What are we doing?
I'm rereading Vinland Saga as we speak.
Yeah. I front-loaded all the bodies in my list because I knew at the end I would be tired. So I just saved like all of my monsters for that.
You also picked the faction that had giants and werewolves in it.
Yes, I did, because I know who I am. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah, to quote Garrett, new friend we met during the Conquest League. Nords are for people with like 3 Wolf Moon shirts and who love Vinland Saga. And he did not know me from Adam and Eve, but he's right, okay? He's absolutely right. Yeah, I want to bring big giants. That's what I'm here for. And I guess that gets me to my hobby progress in games played, because by God,
Yeah.
I painted Big Giant.
You did.
I think the last time we left, I was still working on the Ice Giant. It's done. I'm really proud of it. I actually think it turned out beautifully. It was a hell of a process. It took days and days. I don't even know how many hours I spent on it, but like I'm only ever going to have one Ice Giant in a list. And if I'm ever going to have one thing one of something in a list, especially like a big king of the giants, I want to spend more time on him. So I just pushed real hard, got it done in time, and I was fully painted for 1500, which felt delightful. Then got 2 games in. The first game was against City States. That was it. First time playing City States since like my little demo game. It was a very techie game. Very techie, very careful, waiting for someone to sort of like get out of positioning while we both scored objectives, and then dogpiled them when they like scooched too far forward, and won the game on momentum. And then the second game was against Garrett and his 100 Kingdoms, which every 100 Kingdoms game I've ever played has been a blast. But by God, now I have fear in my heart. It was painful.
The Ashen Dawn.
God, yeah. He brought a full brick, I think, 5-man squad of Ashen Dawn. And then a Priory Commander, I think, was the hero. That was like an Ashen Dawn, but cooler. And that block of 6 things killed my whole army. God, they're terrifying.
Systematically, yeah.
Everything they touched evaporated.
Yeah, and then like my league games, I'd also played against Garrett with his 100 Kingdoms and his Ashen Dawn, and they suplexed a T-Rex into outer space.
Yeah, they suplexed my Ice Giant.
Yeah,
not even on the charge.
Cool. Like, it's pretty cool.
I was told
those are just normal dudes, man. They're just normal dudes.
Yeah, I was told that like, yeah, if you can stop them from getting the charges, it'll be all right, or like getting the flanks, it'll be okay. I got the dream scenario. I got an Ice Giant. He got the charge. He got into their flank. He got the clash. He hit him in the flank with -3 rend. He got the spell off. He did like 8 hits there. All of it went through, and I killed 1.5 horses with like almost 20 attacks, 14 of them at -3. And then they turned and clapped him. Not even on the charge, just one-shotted him from 100% to 0% health. It was wild. Wow, that's a terrifying unit. And I don't have an answer. My answer that I stumbled into and won me the game was I died on objectives. So he turned me to pink mist, but my mist landed on the stuff I needed. So I guess that's a Nord victory.
Yeah.
Sticking with the fluff.
Mission accomplished. Yeah, so like I had a very similar game with Garrett, except for I lost. Had a great time though. Really, it was watching Warbread just get obliterated by by cavalry was pretty fun. And then watching a T-Rex chomp down on crossbowmen was also pretty fun. But my other game
crossbowmen, though, for the record, the crossbowmen outfought your T-Rex, and it can never show its face again on the field of battle.
It is true. They did. The crossbowmen did outfight a T-Rex, which is pretty cool.
The T-Rex dealt, 2 wounds to the crossbowman, and the crossbowman dealt, 6 to the T-Rex.
And there was 4 of us watching this game, just hooting and hollering. It was great. And then my first game of that day was against Dwegom, the guy Nick at the shop in our league, and he... Poor Dwegom. We had a great match back and forth, and it was really neck and neck there for a while. And then he just botched a charge on his Dragon Slayers into my T-Rex, and then I made my charge with my T-Rex, and then proceeded to eat all the Dragon Slayers with a very high spiked roll that just he didn't save and just died. Which he took it like a champ, it was a great game, but I feel really bad for those Dragon Slayers, but I know that my luck has run out because I died to Ashen Dawn with the T-Rex. So the next time I have to fight those Dragon Slayers, they're going to obliterate that T-Rex, and to be honest, it deserves it. Because Dragon Slayers are awesome, and he painted his very well. Like, they look very good. Couldn't be happier to get my ass beat by Dragon Slayers painted by Nick.
Yeah, so far the league has just been a delight, truly.
Yeah,
an
it's
absolute
great.
delight. And being fully painted feel really good. And now I'm working on getting painted for 2K. So I could like stay up to date. I've just got to paint 6 dire wolves and a werewolf lord.
Yeah. And we'll talk more about Conquest in the Conquest update video. But otherwise, it's 40K talk time.
It's true. Play the music. All right, John, 40K. There's a Dataslate.
Yeah.
Man, people have a lot of feelings.
Yeah, so it seems like every time one of these data slates comes out, everyone's got a ton to say about it. It's probably something to do with the fact that they take forever to come out in between. So like there's just a whole bunch of time to build up frustration.
A lot of like emotion and frustration.
Yeah.
And there's really no no vent port for a lot of folks.
Yeah. And in a reoccurring theme, it always feels like the data slates don't do enough, but simultaneously do too much in other areas. So like we'll talk about it. But it seems like the biggest changes have been that like Eldar got another nerf. It seems all of those memes talking about like we've had first Eldar nerf. What about second, third, and fourth Eldar nerf have landed, and Eldar is getting nerfed again.
It's a big one. I don't know how it's gonna do. Yeah. I'm interested to see. They continue to perform really, really well for like spiky competitive players. So like, I get it. Just the thing for me that's notable isn't like getting into the trenches of the debate of like, is this too much or are they ruined? Like I don't know. I have no idea. Like Eldar are very squirrely. They got a deep bench of units that they could pick from. Like, there's all sorts of stuff that a very, very high skill, clever player can, like, pull out the woodwork that you're not going to see coming.
Yep.
But I think instead, when I read the nerfs, the thing that sticks out to me is that, like, they are frustrated. I think GW is frustrated from a game design perspective and doesn't quite know what to do with them. Because, like, they're at this point, the big nerf is that they hacked their core rule in half. Like, for people who aren't like super up to 40K, the Eldar, they can see into the future. It's like in their fluff, they have far seers who see the future. It's their whole thing. So they could pre-roll a pool of dice, of 12 dice, and then set them to the side. And throughout the game, you could cheat those dice in for other dice rolls instead of rolling dice. And it seems like they've been trying to do like finesse light touch changes to try to avoid touching this core rule very much or at all. And now instead they've decided, nope, 12-6, half it. And that's a pretty blunt maneuver. And I think it might show that like they're just desperate and don't know what else to do.
I mean, I think there's also just an overall problem with the Eldar factions, like the Eldari factions in general with GW. We'll get into like the Drukhari changes, which are overall positive, I will say. But like the Dark Eldar, like the Drukhari, the Eldari, the Ynnari, both narratively, they don't really seem to go anywhere. And books-wise, they keep just having problems with. Between last edition and this edition, they just flip who is the problem. And on top of that, they both constantly have the problem of Ynnari is an existing faction that is either basically unusable or it's extremely good and everything suffers for it.
Whew. Yeah.
Which is not good. Like, it seems like they really need to get rein that in and figure out what they want to do with it. It is a shame for the people who are into the Eldari factions because, like, most of the people into them aren't into them for power game reasons. The vast majority of people, I think, play them because they like the aesthetic. It's so unique within the setting in like multiple avenues. Like the Drukhari are these like cool industrial, like 90s sci-fi goth stuff, which is like super cool with a bunch of Hellraiser inspiration. And they have a very unique play style of being like pirates, space pirates.
Jump out of a boat, shoot out of a boat. Like, yeah.
Yeah.
Take damage to deal damage, that sort of thing.
like the Eldar section is more like they are a lot more like of a combined arms tricky force, and like the OG one of those at that from like way back when. And so there's a lot of people with attachments to them. They also they have this sleek, elegant look to them and a very unique sort of like approach. But they're both scalpels. Neither of them are hammers.
Mm-hmm.
And so the balance there has to be very on point. And it's just, you can't balance them like you do every other faction. And then Yunari seeks to just use both.
The best of
so
both
how do you do that
worlds,
without
if
just
you
being...
will.
Yeah, so how do you do that without being crazy? And also, Yunari aren't a real faction because they haven't released a book for it or individual models beyond the original Triumvirate.
Yeah, it's tough. I don't envy them. Like this is a monumental game design feat to try to like balance out well. To try to like do this glass cannon dance of like shoot and fade and jump and tricks. Yeah, I'm glad I don't have to do it because it's rough.
Yeah. And then like the other big nerf was Chaos Space Marines, which like the nerfs there weren't drastic, and to be honest, I think that faction is just fine. I think this is probably one of the most even nerfs they've done in a while. Like, it didn't feel like they just hammered them super hard into the dirt. It felt like they just went, oh, we didn't want that to happen, and just kind of evened it out. Honestly, one of the biggest things I noticed about this Dataslate, there's a lot of points hikes, which is good, because if the game was starting to feel a whole lot like there was just too much on the table.
Yeah, that's been one of my gripes for 40K, is like even non-horde armies feel like a horde army. Tau were the big ones for me that really felt nutty. My list from 9th edition to now went up almost 500 full points. It was 440, I think. That's a lot more stuff on the table.
Yeah.
It just it felt like too much. It's not how I picture the Force, and I think that's true for most people.
And simultaneously, there's some factions that it doesn't feel like you have their appropriate amount. I think Guard is a good example. Like, I think Guard is almost like in a sweet spot where it's perfect. But when you compare it against something like Space Marines currently, I feel like I'm playing Guard the same way I did in like 8th and 9th edition with like the level of stuff on the table. But I don't feel like my opponent is playing Space Marines at the same amount of stuff on the table as 8th and 9th edition. So it can kind of feel overwhelming. Like, it almost feels too mirrored for my liking. Gene Stealer Cult is another good example where, like, I don't think, like, don't get me wrong, Gene Stealer Cult needed to get hit because of the whole forever regenerating list that existed out there. But those nerfs sort of have made the faction a little bit harder to play, and they're already a complicated force. Mm-hmm. So in order to get your army roll to go off, you have to make sure you get past the roll, and then on top of that, you have to like play 4D chess with your opponent and hope they can't get rid of your tokens. And then also still spam MSU units, just a ton of them. It just feels weird.
It just across the board, I want points to go up. I want less stuff. Mm-hmm.
I think I want specifically Marine points to go up.
Yeah.
I think Marine and like Tau points should go up a little bit, which I think this is where they should be right about. I think the weirdest part about this detachment, I think this is like the last negative.
You mean the Dataslate?
The Dataslate, sorry. The last negative that I have about this is the seemingly weird balance decisions with some factions that weren't overly performing, like nerfing World Eater relics and then nerfing a single Sister to Battle list when like they already are performing so poorly. Which like I kind of get, but ultimately all of that is eclipsed by AdMech not being in there, which their book just came out, so like they're probably going to see another update. But like, are AdMech players really going to have to wait 6 months for an update to a book that is lackluster and underperforming?
They're just within the bell curve. Like I'm looking at 40K's own numbers. AdMech is at 46%.
But like that data is incorrect because the book has been like, how long were they collecting that data for since the book came out? Like,
I don't know.
Same thing with Necrons. Like Necrons are already performing really well because of like a handful of strategies, and they didn't get touched at all, which they shouldn't because they just came out. But if you're going to stick to this every 6 months, release a Dataslate update instead of just addressing things when they need to be addressed. I don't know. I'm not a designer. I don't work for the company, but it does seem like this is having to fit within their monetization scheme of print released codexes, and it seems like those two things are clashing when it comes to the playability of the game mixed with what they're trying to do to make money from the rules themselves.
Yeah, I think for me, that's kind of the thing, is I'm looking at some of the armies, and like Tyranids and Astra Militarum and Imperial Knights are all armies sitting at 45% from their own data, like barely within the bell curve, all of which have, like, even outside of win rate, significant game design fundamental issues right now. One of them already had their book, so you know there's no help coming. Like, there's no new codex coming to, like, pick them up. And the other two, they're not even on the roadmap yet. So they're going to be a while out. Like, for me, that's the big downside. It's like, why those obviously need help, and they're not getting it soon.
Yeah, and I think that'll bring us to our first positive, which is the Drukhari.
Who very much needed it, and boy, man, they got it.
Yeah, the new detachment's great. I will say, the one bad part about it, it doesn't even, like, for the Drukhari players, it's for everyone else. Like, if you were any of the other factions who don't have a codex on the roadmap, and you're looking at Drukhari going, why can't that be me? Why isn't that me?
A fair question.
And truly, it should be. Like, there's no reason that it can't be. There is zero reason why GW could not just give out more detachments to every faction that's under 50% win rate, and then put it out there. If anything, playtesting more the detachments before the codex releases gives them the ability to, like, balance them before the codex comes out. And then have the codex introduce the new models like they want to. Like, obviously they're not going to stop selling codexes because they want to make money, and that's the thing they've decided for 10th edition. But, like, you could just wait for the new models to come out for those codexes, because everyone gets a new model with a new book. Give some detachments, at least one, right, to each faction that isn't getting a book this year, or isn't on the roadmap, right? Because no one wants to be in, like, how Guard was in 9th edition, where they sat and sat and sat and sat and sat to get a book that lasted 3 months. Like,
that's the nightmare. God, that's the nightmare.
And so, like, it's just not great. And some of these factions barely have data sheets to go with, even. Like, World Eaters have almost no data sheets in their book. Most of the data sheets are unusable for them because they're just old Chaos Space Marine kits that don't fit the fluff for World Eaters in the first place. And they took out the stuff from the CSM that was cool for them to use, probably because there's other stuff coming, but, like, it's just a weird design spot where the game feels like it's in a good place, and it feels more balanced than it has previously, where, like, we don't have a bunch of codex creep, right? Like, the new codexes aren't coming out and, like, stomping the yard. They're coming out, and they're like, oh, that's pretty cool. Like, there's outliers. Like, look, Necron's got a little strong, but that's nothing a little bit of balancing can't fix. For the most part, almost every one of the codexes comes out, and it's like, it's okay. It's not crazy. Like, Space Marines are pretty good, but they can be fixed. It's not like how it was. But instead, we have this problem of, like, a lack of variety. Because Drukhari, like, I played against the Drukhari detachment, and it was really cool. It played exactly the way you expect Drukhari to play. Our editor, Seth, he has been playing Drukhari since 7th edition? Yeah, 7th edition, maybe 6th. 6th or 7th edition, somewhere around there. And, like, it's one of the factions he started with, and he really, really, really enjoyed it. Never got rid of the army, always kept it. Has kind of struggled to play it since 7th edition, because the design of 8th didn't really benefit them there very much, and then in 9th, the way they played was dissimilar from how he wanted to play them. And at the time, also was playing with a bunch of new people, and right when the Drukhari book came out, and they were really busted, and he didn't want to be that guy. And then 10th edition came around, and they were just very clunky. The one detachment they had for him forced you to be 3 armies in a trench coat. It wasn't really good. But he had, like, genuine fun and a blast with this new detachment, because it plays like Space Pirate Dark Eldar, which is the best iteration of Dark Eldar.
I mean, I imagine, for me, that's, like, the core fantasy of Dark Eldar. It's like, you are edgy Space Pirate.
Yeah, and it leans more into the glass cannon aspect of, like, okay, killing stuff gets you power from pain points. Making things battle shocked gives you power from pain points. You get you get these points, you can use them to reroll hits, like as a buff, or you can get like advanced charge or something like that. Like there's a bunch of different buffs you can give yourself in Power and Pain, and there's like a little engine you can build while also like making good trades. And they have a bunch of good stratagems in the new detachment, which allow you to do like cool transport shenanigans where you like hop out of a transport and shoot something and hop back in, or like move a transport super far up the table, deploy out of it, charge something, and then hop back into a transport, which is super cool and absolutely fits their fluff, right? Like it's hitting all the points. And even as the opponent, it didn't feel busted. Like I was playing Genestealer Cult, it's kind of a tough match for Genestealer Cult into the new Dark Eldar, because I help them with their abilities a lot. But like it was pretty good. Like it was a pretty good match, and I thoroughly enjoyed myself. And it felt like a 40K game in a lot of ways, like, if that makes sense. Whereas I think some games of 40K more recently have felt not like 40K games. They have felt very front-loaded. We're really playing 2 turns of a 5-turn game. We played like 4 turns, and it felt like the whole time we were on neck and neck.
Yeah,
which is where I want the game to be.
Yeah, and I think it gives hope for the factions that don't have any help coming, and they didn't get anything here. But at least like when they look at Dark Eldar and when they look at Death Guard, it's another great one. I just taught some folks how to play 10th edition for the first time. One of them was playing Death Guard. Death Guard felt great. Like the stuff they added on after release, really great. It opened up that book immensely. Gave them some more flex, gave them some more fluff, gave them a little more flavor. And when you look at that and Drukhari, I think it does give some hope that like, oh, they can give these other factions some more variety. Just they've got to decide when they're going to do it. But I'm glad that Drukhari felt good. Because I don't think anyone I have seen was like, yeah, this Drukhari thing works for me. Okay, that did not land for the Drukhari folks, which is just a shame.
Yeah, and I think this really benefits. The only thing that's odd is that a lot of the Drukhari range is still not in the great model-wise, but
yeah,
it's okay. It's kind of part of the allure to some degree if you're into Dark Eldar. You're not into Dark Eldar, so you don't get to have an opinion, Joe.
I don't think it's correct. You did get me to 3D print and convert a whole Eldar army, and Dark Eldar are divergent from Eldar. So I kind of I'm the grandfather of Dark Eldar. So
more
I can
like cousins. More like cousins.
Like Papa
More like
elves.
cousins.
Like I'm playing the Papa elves. Like I can have an opinion.
Papa elf. Got it.
Like it's probably going to be off color from my experience. And like woefully out of left field, but like I can have an opinion.
Well, I know there's one thing you can have an opinion about, and that's the change to your Golden Boys. The bane of all T-Suns players in existence, Custodes.
My time has come. Yes, this is the change I wanted. John and I have been talking about this since they made the nerf to Custodes, and they changed Dev Wounds, and then it like obliterated Custodes. I've played a lot of Custodes. They're actually the faction I've played the most of in 10th edition. I really, really like my elite golden lads. And I actually just recently, just before Christmas, did a store league that wrapped up after 8 matches. And I played Custodes for all of them, same list for all of them. It was after the nerf. It was after the Dev Wounds changed. Like they were at a 45% win rate. The internet said they were terrible, blah, 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 blah. I went undefeated in that league with my Custodes list that was supposed to be terrible. I actually think there was more gas in that tank than people give them credit for. I will stick to that. Like I've played the games. I won the games against better armies, quote unquote. So like, I don't think Custodes were terrible, but really the big pain point for me in that league was Dev Wounds. It's rough. Truly, there was zero interaction with it. If anything had Dev Wounds, and they could auto-proc it, you were boned. Just boned. Pick up your army. Just like pick it up. Yeah, these elite guys, the whole point is that they get a feel no pain against the stuff that like bypasses their armor, that they're really, really, really cool, unless like you're a space marine who has a doily on his shoulder, in which case, sorry, you die. This is better. This is much better. Because in that league, my faction ability might as well not existed. I played 6 games in that league, and then a couple outside of the league, and in all of those matches post-nerf, my faction ability came up precisely twice in all of those games and all of those turns.
Yeah, because the vast majority of mortal wounds now are through dev wounds.
Yeah, once somebody tank shocked me, that's a place where they exist.
And grenades, maybe.
And the last time it was Death Guard, and one of their units was able to like do some mortals. But that's it. The others, I had no faction rule. Now, though, we have a faction rule, which is great.
And they kept them at the correct size, so you can't bring 10-man blobs of custodians or whatever it was.
You never should have been able to do it in the first place. If there was no better thing that I could have pointed to be like, there's too much shit on the table. People go, what do you mean? I'm bringing custodies, who I used to bring in squads of 3 in reinforced space marine sizes right now. Like 10 custodies. What are we doing? What are we doing?
Yeah, like it was something else.
Feels better. There's still like a lot of issues in that index. I won't get into them. Like the internal balance is really rough. Real rough. There's like half of those units, I have no idea why they exist. They're really out of skew in the politest way. But at least this, you can still get your games in while we're waiting on the codex. It was a great change. They also did some point drops, which felt nice, because they did, like, in many places, swing the nerf bat too hard on custodies, so now they are trying to, like, put a little band-aid on some of the boo-boos. And for me, though, the core rule change is the thing we really needed the most. Now we can actually, like, interact with the game with our core rule, which is pretty cool. Pretty cool. I like that.
Yeah, I'm excited about the Custodies change. There's a small change in Grey Knights, too, which interested me for a second. Not because I play Grey Knights, but because, like, I want to see Grey Knights do well. I think a lot of the things in the current meta can get shifted around if some of the more elite, like, bully armies become better again. I just think that's the case often. And the change to Caldor Drago to allow you to use the Teleport Strike to get his buff is pretty good. Gives him a pretty cool, like, turnaround for that faction, which is neat.
Also, some of their big weapons now hit on 3s instead of 4s, which is really nice.
Yeah, that's pretty good. There was some knight changes, points drops across for both Chaos Knights and Imperial Knights. I don't think it changes either of those armies very well. It doesn't get you another knight.
I guess it gets you upgrades? I don't know if those upgrades really matter a lot, though, because of the way they, like, I'm not super familiar with Chaos Knights, but, like, for Imperial Knights, they really just sort of, like, shattered the Armiger buff ability, the way that worked. And I don't know how you point your way out of that nerf hammer.
I don't think you do.
Like, you changed a core thing. Like, you can't just, like, change the fixins and undo it.
Yeah, and like I think Chaos Knights are still going to be okay. The problem with both Knight factions is that competitively they're always going to struggle unless they're overpowered, and then casually they are always going to seem to overperform.
Noob stompers,
because they're detrimental to like a new player experience, because most people when they start an army are going to have like a little bit of everything and not enough combo to like regularly be able to take out a knight. Like if you're fighting 5 knights, you need to be able to kill a knight a turn.
You need you need like multiple anti-armor units.
And the game changes then there's 6 units, like 6 models on one side of the table, and then like 100 on the other. Like the game is fundamentally about winning objectives, and when most people that are playing are not an experience level, they look at the game and go, oh, I win by killing stuff, then getting objectives, instead of getting objectives while killing stuff or getting objectives primarily and killing stuff when it's a good trade. There's just different things, right? And they're just hard to play around. I think they're going to keep having balance problems with that because the competitive scene is going to show one side and then the casual side is going to show another. And I think one of the other big takeaways, and there's another channel that covers this really well, Tabletop Tactics.
We can actually link their video below.
Yeah, like they brought up a couple of points in their video that I think makes a lot of sense. And that they clearly play test these rules with a very small portion, like sample size. They decide these changes based off of like tournament metrics from the highest performing players in this game with a small playtest group to make changes. And I think that it kind of goes beyond just that. I think you can see it in some of the design, some of the lists. They tend to skew towards specific lists that you've seen in the past. Like I will use the Ironhead detachment as an example. The Dreadnought list has not gone away, despite the fact that it existed in like 8th edition, 9th edition, and now 10th edition. I don't know what else to say about it, but other than I don't think it's working for the vast majority of your players. Like, I think the vast majority of the people who are playing the game are not the whales that are playing at competitive level. Like the big money spenders who are willing to spend a bunch of money to go to LVO and Adepticon and buy up whole new armies to go to a new event. Like, sure, that's cool, but they're not the vast majority of your player base. I think the vast majority of the player base are just like people who have stuff they buy occasionally when it comes out and play with their buddies. And I think the game has gotten to a point where sometimes it feels like sometimes you just can't play the game till you get an update. And not like in a small way, but in a kind of big way.
Yeah.
Like,
I don't know if I feel that far, like you can't play. For me, it just feels like, why would you wanna?
Yeah, that's sort of what I'm saying, right? Like if you have 3 people in your play group, right? Say your brother and then like your best friend from high school. All 3 of you have been playing 40K for 10 years. One of you plays Ultramarines. One of you plays Imperial Guard. And the other one plays Chaos Demons, right? That has got to be a weird pod to play in. Because you don't have the Eldar, you don't have the Custodies, you don't have the Knights, you don't have most of these changes coming out. This new detachment, this new like Dataslate that came out, basically doesn't touch most of what you're doing. You got a little bit of points changes here and there, but like the Chaos Demons players probably have been having a pretty bad time for the most of that time frame. Space Marine player just got a Codex, and they're probably going to be the only one with the Codex for the next year. Do they keep playing that game for a year? Or do they not? Like, does one of those players now have to go get a new army to feel like they can keep playing with their friend? Or are they just going to put the game on the shelf and then wait to play the game and then play a different game?
I know for me, the answer is definitely put it on the shelf. Like, yeah, because that's the thing for me is like, I think the Dataslate is a wonderful step in the right direction for a lot of forces. Hell, especially for Custodies, like very much a step in the right direction. Obviously, Drakari, very much step in the right direction. I already mentioned earlier, I think for Death Guard, their changes, very much step in the right direction. Like, they are very capable of adding the thing that I think this game needs more of to make it enjoyable for people at like the mid levels, who are like really into it, but they're not tournament competitive folks. Through and through. You go to like events and tournaments for fun from time to time, but you're not like grinding the circuit, looking for your ITC points, stuff like that. For me, that's variety. Like that, the thing that makes this feel stagnant for me currently is that none of my forces have a codex, which means all of my forces have a single subfaction. Those subfactions only give one playstyle bonus. They only give one incentive, and half of my war scrolls are terrible. So like, I have a restrictive subfaction. I have a restricted list of units that are even okay and I can make work. And when you add those together, you end up with lists that look the same, that feel the same, that play the same. Yeah. And over time, that Like aside from competitive balance and win rates and all the other stuff, like I really don't think they matter as much when they don't feel fun because you're playing the same thing over and over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And the fun is where I think you keep fans, you keep people engaged.
Yeah, I would like to see them shift from a purely focus on getting the win rates up or down sort of balance decision, as in like instead going for, okay, obviously do that to a degree, but then also work on the internal balance. Like if you're seeing competitive lists where people are bringing like only 20% of the book, maybe take a hard look at the other 80% of the book. Like change the data sheets, change the models rules, like shake it up. Like you're a multi-billion-dollar company. You own this IP. Shift it around. Like if you're going to charge people an arm and a leg for rules, at least do your due diligence to sort of like give them an updating living system of rules. Like you're double dipping the charges on these rules now because you're charging for an app with a monthly subscription, charging for codexes.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
and the price on both have gone up.
Yeah, like at least provide more than like, hey, we're going to update you with new rules for this game every 3 years. That and sometimes is going to completely like negate your former rules, but also we can't guarantee that you're going to have your faction have rules until like 6 months before we drop the next edition. We can't guarantee that that's going to happen. We can guarantee that you're going to have a version of rules, but we can't guarantee they're going to be fun or good or something that you're actually going to want to play for 2.5 years.
Yeah, I would love for them to handle some internal balance stuff. I don't think they will, because it's the hardest way to solve this problem. I think it's the most thorough, but it is the most time-consuming. But if you really want to like cut corners and not do the full rehab of a faction and really like look at their units that you never see, add more sub-factions. Like, do the Drukhari thing, but for more units. Like, I think, for me, that's the takeaway. It's like, this is a step in the right direction, but like, the thing you lean into is you need to add variety to keep people engaged, to give them more choice, more option, more fun. And that is the way you can cut corners on man-hour time and design time and still get it out.
Because I think everybody here wants to play with their war dollies. Like, everyone wants to play with their Warhammer figurines, but no one wants to play the same game of orcs 12 times in a row in 2 months.
That was my issue. Fun, but there's only, again, that's the one that is one of the most restrictive. You have a sub-faction that only buffs the melee. You have a very limited list of orc units that are decent. You got like 10 to pick from that are decent, maybe 15. Out of
Sounds like world leaders.
out of a colossal book. And those two things together means, here's my list. I have nothing else I could do with this list. For me, it has made it feel stagnant. And I would like that to not be the case. Codexes are about to start hitting hot and heavy. So maybe this will feel better. But like the Dataslate, on one hand, I have some icks of like, or just some like, not icks sound worse, but like some sour taste in my mouth about some things. But largely, I see a glimmer of hope of like, y'all, you could do this. I don't know if they're gonna, but more sub-faction, more gooder for the stuff at least that's not going to be out with like this year.
Yeah. We will be playing the new Tau book when it comes out. It'll be great.
I hope it's great.
We got multiple people in our pod that play Tau, and
there's two of us. Boy howdy, there's two of us.
We're going to be playing a bunch of games soon.
There's already shit talk of trying to beat up our Tau.
It's true. I'm going to play World Leaders, and I'm going to break your back. Like, welcome to the WWE wrestling match that is Angron and your Crisis Suits.
That's okay. I have more Crisis Suits. Crisis Suits cost a nickel.
They got a points hike. So no, they don't. Now they cost 25 cents. I hope you brought your Aldi quarter.
I think I can find room in the list. Also, broadsides are turbo cheap. Like, hey, railguns. Yeah, I definitely going to be talking about Tau. I'm looking forward to that book. Custodes, I'm looking forward to that book. Orcs, looking forward to that book. Like, it could be a great spring for me. Just got to wait for it to get here. And again, we don't do like all faction reviews or all codex reviews, but some of those, if they're cool enough, we might actually do full reviews on. I would love to be so into Tau. We do a Tau review. I'd love to be so into Custodes. I do a full Custodes review. Especially after hyped up on finishing the End and the Death Part 3.
Yo, we didn't talk about the Blood Angels changes. They got slightly better, but they're still pretty okay.
I would love to play Blood Angels right now, but it's just, they're boring. It's just the worst thing for me. But soon, I will weep openly, wet, manly tears, and play by Blood Angels. And depending on how things go, you might get it. For now, that's been all of our thoughts. Bonafide, Kentucky Fried. We'll see y'all on the next video.